I'm a celebrated skier, folks, and qualified to smirk. I've skied more hills than any man from Frisco to New York. But talking about the skiing I've done is my one and only quirk, especially when I'm...
My favorite saying is life is much too important to take seriously. The early days of Aspen was fabulous. Somebody once said, hey, if you remember the 60s and 70s, you weren't here. I mean, everybody was drugged up, but thank God, I never drugged. I was probably like Clinton. I couldn't inhale, and so I didn't like grass, and I never did coke or anything like that. It was just probably my upbringing. Plus, I'm allergic to alcohol, so I can drive everybody to home from bars and restaurants and parties. And but anyway, getting back to the early days, we were with a couple friends of mine. They're brothers, Jack and Don Crawford. And Jack Crawford looks like Earl Ives, goatee. He was probably the best big man skier in America. Weighed 245 pounds. He was about 5'11", and a fabulous skier. So was his brother Don. So I would follow him down the mountain, and I became a good skier because of them. But we got so good, we started doing trick skiing. We could do 360s down the mountain, ski backwards. We'd have people spread their legs, ski under their legs. So ski with one ski over our heads. It was a lot of fun. And the parties, oh my God, they were so wide open and fun. And big wealthy guys from Miami would throw parties on the Red Mountain that throw doors open, catered for 150 people, of which they knew 30, and the rest were, guest to guest, or they said, hey, bring us a lot of people. And there was a man that gets a lot of negative press that I call a friend, is a wonderful man, and his name is David Koch Industries. Koch is 6'6", and I think just such a down-to-earth man. Well, he would throw parties when he was a bachelor, and he didn't get married until he was 50, and he's 75 today. He would throw parties for 1,000 people. He had a double lot by the music tent, and he would tent the back of the house, double tents, big tents, 100 feet by 100 feet, plus his home, and have live bands and catered. There'd be tables of food in different sections, Asian food and barbecue foods and Mexican foods at different tables. And he'd invite all kinds of celebrities there, and they were just gung-ho. They were just so much fun. And then eventually he got engaged to a beautiful lady who is still his wife, and she made him cut way back, and eventually down to about 450, 500, and then eventually made him quit once they got married. But that was a fun day. Now, along the way, there was a most interesting man, about one of the handful of guys that I would say is the most interesting man that I've ever met in my life. His name was Gene Reardon. Gene died 10 years ago at 75, too early. He had bad heredity. He was a lawyer in Denver. His father at one time was head of the IRS in Denver. Later on, when the father retired from the bench, he went over to the enemy, Coors, and they became tax attorneys for Coors. Gene Reardon had a photographic memory. And for people's names, addresses, what have you. But he had something that also I think is very important to success in life is imagination. Now, what is imagination? It's able to image. Image what? Image whatever interests you. In his case, he loved to party. And being Irish, he was a big drinker. But he thought up every, and I mean every party, big party in Aspen. And luckily, I was part of most of them. He liked me, he liked the Crawford brothers, and away we went. He started, which is still going on, he started 50 years ago a thing called the Aspen Wine Party. It started at a small party in March up at a place called Peanut Butter Ridge, which is right near the Ajax Mountain, down as you're coming down. At Peanut Butter Ridge was very informal. On the picnic tables there, we would just put big blocks of cheese and cheap wine, and people would come by, either take their skis off and stay a while, or pick up some cheese and wine and keep skiing. So that's it. But after a few years there, we decided to go formal, and we went to a place called Blondie's Cabin, and it was owned by the Pfister family, Art Pfister. Art Pfister was an early pioneer here in Aspen who bought 700 acres where the Maroon Creek Club is now, and the golf course and all of that area was all owned by. And I asked him one time when he came to Aspen in 1948, I said, Art, what did you pay for that property? And he said, well, let me put it this way. Last year I bought a tractor and paid double for the tractor what I paid for the whole parcel. So I figured that was about $50 an acre that he paid for the 700 or somewhere like that, about $50 an acre. Can you imagine? Anyway, about 35,000, I think it came out to be. And anyway, he owned this about 5 acre parcel and called Blondie's. And why it was called Blondie's Cabin, Blondie was a prostitute during the mining days. And she would, the story goes, service the miners right in the little log cabin. So, but anyway, he let us use it every year for the next many years, until actually the year before last. And so we would fence it in, and by the Aspen Ski Corps, they loved our party because more people went up the gondola and paid the price for the fee and what have you. So we would have parties for an average of 500 people, and they usually was on the second week of March, and we by invite only, and we'd have a disc jockey, we had a dance floor, we'd pack it in, and then we also had beer, wine, and soft drinks and water, and we had hot food on the mountain catered by local restaurants. The last few years by La Hosteria, who would serve, they would pre-cook the food because up at 10,000 feet it takes forever to cook. So they'd pre-cook it and heat it and serve it. And we'd have a big Matus bottle balloon, green, and that we'd blow up, and that was stood up about 60 feet high. And so it was a party to go to. Then in a charity auction in 1986, I bought a bridge, or the name rights to a bridge, here in Aspen. And it's right by the old Aspen Art Museum, John Denver Station, and the theater in the park. And I bought the name rights to it, and I put plaques on both sides. And now next year will be 30 years at the Ron Krajian Bridge. So then Gene Reardon again said, why don't we have a summer party? And we'll call it the Tour de Rump. Not Trump, Rump. And we said, great. So 4 of us started the party, and away we went. And again, it was a bicycle treasure hunt. You would go to 5 different locations, and when you got there, we would serve refreshments, no alcohol because of insurance, and people would try to answer a question with your 4-person team. And there were about 30 teams, so that meant 120 people. It was a shotgun start, and they would go to different locations, and we would give them a strong hint of the location. One would be at Coke Park, another one would be the Ute Trail, another one, so forth. And they would, when you got there, would be like answer questions in school. Name the 7 wonders of the ancient and modern world. Name the main islands in the Hawaii chain, and name the longest river in Europe, and so forth. So then we would give prizes for the most questions answered, the best costumes, and people really had some great costumes. There were pregnant nuns, there was people that came as sheiks, there were people that got all kinds of costumes, Cinderella, what have you. And it was just a big event. But for lunch, we'd invite also non-people that were not in the bike race. We ended up with 300 people on the bridge or around it. Now, I forgot to mention one thing. When originally he said, let's have the party on the bridge, he said, Ron, I want you to go and get a permit. So I said, all right. So I go to the Parks and Recreation. They said, what are you going to do? I said, we're going to have a party. You're going to serve food? Yeah. You're going to serve liquor? Yeah. On the bridge? I said, yeah. You can't do that. I said, oh, all right. So I go back and told Gene this. Gene said, let's do it anyway, see what happens. We did it for the next 21 years. Nobody said a word. And finally, about 4 years ago, some young, nice kid in his 30s said, hey, you got a permit? We said, no, we need a permit. Oh, of course you need a permit. So they kicked us off, and now the last 4 years we've been at Coke Park. But then we went on to other parties. Another one was the Fish House Punch Party, and that was during the holidays. And we'd take over the ballroom of the Hotel Jerome. So it was all Gene Reardon's imagination. Then we did a New York party where we would take the Circle Lines and rent the entire ship for that evening, and which went around the Statue of Liberty and invite 300 people at black tie and serve them food. So on and on. So we got to be characters like Gene Reardon. Jack and his brother Don, by the way, were the biggest developers in the history of Hawaii for land. They at one time owned 16,000 acres behind the Kona coast up in the Black Lava Rock, and subdivided into 12 1,000-acre parcels and sold it all over every state in America and 44 foreign countries, and retired very wealthy. Well, in the old days, and a lot of people miss the old Aspen, which I do too, but there are things I don't miss about the old Aspen. But I'll start with the good part. In old Aspen, Remember Ron Popeil? He invented the Vegematic, and it cuts, it slices, peels. Well, he owned a house right above where I lived at the Tipple Inn, and he would have parties. And in those days, everybody mixed, and nobody ever wore a jacket for the men, or women didn't dress. Everybody had jeans and real casual wear. But plumbers and ski instructors and waitresses and multimillionaires all mixed. You wouldn't even know one from another, And then something happened. Aspen was discovered by the super rich. And little by little, as all these big homes were built up on Red Mountain, Starwood, it started changing. And little by little, the millionaires started inviting mostly other millionaires or famous people. And it got segregated. And the people that had less money had their parties, and the wealthy. And it's that way for about the last, I'd say, 20 years. Things I do like about today, and wasn't crazy about the old days, is that in the old days you had to take 3 chairlifts to go up Ajax, where we mostly skied. And it was so cold. You don't get cold skiing, by the way. You get cold standing around in lines or sitting in the chair being snowed on. And that's where you get cold. So by the time you got up to the top, you're freezing. And so now, some 30 years ago, they put in the gondola, which, by the way, is it's the longest gondola in the world. People say they have longer ones in Europe. No, they don't. They have trams in Europe, which is where you stand up and you put your skis outside. No, this is gondola. It's 2.2 miles, as I think, to the very top. And so that was a godsend. And then, of course, we had some great restaurants then, and we have more today. And we have a lot of really, really good restaurants for people that don't have a lot of money, and you can get a good meal. And of course, probably, Little Annie would be the most famous of them all, which has been around forever. So anyway, overall, Aspen, and I told the Chamber of Commerce, I told the mayor one time that, hey, there's motto ought to be, there's only one Aspen. I told the story, this couple in Silicon Valley, they end up selling their company for $100 million. And one turns to the other and said, honey, we've always wanted this mountain, ski house. Let's go to Breckenridge. No way. It's Aspen, or possibly a distant second is Sun Valley or Vail, but there's only one Aspen. And just be glad, happy to be part of it. And by the way, approximately 400 billionaires on the Forbes 400, which are almost all billionaires, 50 of them are supposedly have places in the Aspen Valley. So that is kind of an interesting statistic. Oh God, yeah. When Gene Verdon, going back again to the bridge, when Gene Verdon decided to have the Tour de Rump, Donald Trump got hold of it, and he used to come here all the time, and so he had a 2-page letter delivered to me, delivered to Gene, and the Crawford brothers, saying to cease and desist, that it was too much like his Tour de Trump. And so Gene Reardon, being a lawyer, writes this nice letter back, and he said, hey, this is just a little community affair, no commercialism, no nothing. And in fact, we'd like to invite Mr. and Mrs. Donald Trump to come to it. And we never heard another word. Well, we saved the letter, and we show it off every time we have our Tour de Rump. Well, you know what? We're very saddened, because all my compatriots that throw all these parties are now all in their late 70s to eldest one we have is 86. And there's nobody coming along to do the parties we've been doing for 50 years, 40 and 50. There's no snowboarders, no kids, 25, 30 years old that are doing these parties anymore. So once we're gone, they're basically over except for little parties. I'm for keeping Aspen like the old, the building especially.